Thank you all for joining us. My name is Annie Wheeler, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator with the Campus Kitchens Project. This month, we're excited to continue our Summit Squared partnership with the Universities Fighting World Hunger and the Rockefeller Foundation to welcome Kimia Dixit and Alex Orton from Hattaway Communications to discuss Hatch for Good and effective storytelling. Alex Orton is a digital associate with Hattaway and provides a digital perspective to the research-based strategy, content, and campaigns that they create for their clients. Before joining Hattaway, Alex managed campaigns and digital communications for national nonprofits, trade associations, corporations, and startups. He earned a bachelor's degree in communications from Brigham Young University in his free time. He enjoys spontaneous travel, pop music, and fun facts. Kimia Dixit is a senior associate at Hattaway and is focused on digital communications, storytelling, crafting campaign strategies. Having managed global and national campaigns, she's interested in audience engagement and building motivated communities. Prior to joining the Hattaway team, she worked at Ketchum, a public relations firm where she served federal agencies such as the Department of Health and Human Services, the Environmental Protection Agency, and major brands such as the National Football League, Pfizer, FedEx, and Hertz. She graduated from the University of Pune in India with a bachelor's degree in economics, and in her free time, she enjoys exploring new cities, learning about different cultures, reading, and playing the drums. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the both of you to go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you so much. This is Kimia, and I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for taking the time to be here today and learning more about storytelling. So before I get started, I have a little bit of a sore throat. So I have two goals today. One is to help you become a better storyteller, and two, try not to cough during the webinar. So we will see if I get to both of my goals. So what have you signed up for today? The agenda we have is, first I'll be introducing you to some of the work we've been doing with the Rockefeller Foundation around storytelling for the last 3 years, as well as how we developed the product Hatch for Good. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the social impact story map, which really is a framework that helps you develop compelling story outlines that you can then turn into different types of stories depending on your audiences and the platforms that your audiences are on. And then Alex will talk about engagement best practices. So once you have that story, how do you make sure that your audiences see that story and are actually engaged with it? And then we'll have a little bit of time for some questions if you have any. So about 3 years back, we started working with the Rockefeller Foundation to really understand what it is that the social impact sector needs when it comes to storytelling. So our first step in that process was to really conduct a landscape analysis, which involved us speaking to many thought leaders in this area. So you can see we spoke to some big brands from technology, media, academia, government, entertainment, branding, and also social impact organizations who would finally be the end users of whatever came out of that research. So based on that research, we found that there are 4 pillars of strategic storytelling. The first one really is strategy, so knowing what your mission is, knowing what your goal is, and figuring out who your audiences are and what your objectives for them are. Then we have content. Here's where you really have to create compelling content to cut through the digital noise and create something that your audiences will find engaging. And then we have engagement. So once you have that compelling content, you have to take it to your audiences. So how can you do that? And then finally, evaluation. So once you have your stories, how do you make sure that you know that they're working or not working and make strategic changes based on those findings? So these are the 5 pillars that we found make a strategic story. 4 pillars that make a strategic story. And then another thing that we heard is that social impact organizations wanted a website where they could get started on their storytelling journey. So based on this research, we built hatchforgood.org, and you'll see a screenshot of the website here, and please feel free to go and look at it after this webinar. It's a free resource. We plan on it being a free resource for the foreseeable future. And as you can see, there are 4 sections there: content, engagement, strategy, and evaluation, which tie back to our research. So Hatch is really divided into 2 sections. The first section is lessons, which are interactive. So you go into the lessons section. So this is a screenshot of the strategy piece, and you answer the questions that we have there. They're pretty short lessons, and you can take them based on the time you have available. So each bite-sized section will probably take you about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And once you're done with that section, it will give you your answers and show you next steps on what to do with your story. So that's really the first element of Hatch for Good, the interactive lessons, and they exist for each of those 4 pillars. Then we have the Explore section, and this is really to help you understand what the storytelling trends are, as well as spark ideas and also case studies and other best practices from the field. So if you're looking for something quick to read and spark some inspiration, the Explore section is the best place to go, and it has tons of articles from thought leaders in the storytelling space. So that's Hatch. Please check it out once this webinar is over and you have some time. So as I had told you earlier that I'll be showing you a framework that is really helpful and useful in building a compelling story outline or story arc. So one of the things that we heard in our research is that social impact organizations have a very hard time understanding where to start when it comes to their stories. So they lack the ability to come up with a structure that makes a compelling story arc. So what we did is we did some research. We looked at a few different models that are good for storytelling, and we zeroed in on the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, which is seen across literature as well as movies, so think Shakespeare and Star Wars. We took that tried and true formula, and then we adapted it to the social impact sector to build the social impact story map. So I'm going to show you the map now. As you can see here, it has 4 core elements, and these are really flexible, so you can move around and play around with them depending on where you are in your storytelling process. The first element is status quo and first steps. The second one is obstacles and allies. The third one is breakthrough, and finally we have impact. So these are really the core elements that you need to structure your story around. And under that, you will see there are various different steps: eyes open, doubts arise, solutions emerge, first steps, etc. So based on, again, where you are in your storytelling journey or on your project, you can mix and match these steps as they make sense. So I will be showing you soon an example from a social impact organization. But before I get to that, usually I tell a pop culture story, and Alex would have probably done Star Wars, but I'm going to do Harry Potter. So starting with eyes open, that's when Harry gets the letter that tells him he is a wizard and he has to go to a magical school. But then doubts arise because he really cannot believe such a magical world exists, and his aunt and uncle are actively trying to keep him from being a part of that. But then solutions emerge when Hagrid takes him to Diagon Alley and shows him that this world actually does exist. And then first steps are taken when he goes on to Hogwarts Express, which is the train that takes him to this magical school. And then, as in every story, obstacles are encountered when Voldemort, who's the bad guy, tries to kill him every chance he gets. But luckily for Harry, he has a lot of allies and friends like Hermione and Ron who are helping him fight Voldemort and make the world a better place. And I think I'll stop here because otherwise we're getting into spoiler territory, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. So I'll move on to the social impact organization story now. And this social impact organization is Charity Water. So Charity Water works to provide clean water to developing countries in Asia and Africa. So this, it's a video that I'll be showing now, and I'll walk you through the steps and the structure that fits with the social impact story map. So here we first start with character and location setting to really make the characters relatable to your audiences. You can see loving mothers, carefree children, hardworking people. We're using positive attributes to make the characters relatable so you feel like knowing what happens to them in the story. And this is really where your eyes first start opening to the problem. And you see that this is the only water they've ever known. So you can see the doubts arise here. It's the challenge. But then solutions emerge. They're building a road. And then first steps are taken. There's obstacles to encounter. It takes a long time for them to build this road. So finally they have it, and allies join. So the action is taken after allies join. And finally breakthrough occurs. They have clean water. And now they're really focusing on the people and the impact. The lives are changing. You can see here that they're showing lives have changed and things are different. And these are lessons learned and calls to action. Great. So you can see how the social impact story map fits different types of stories. It could be applied to Harry Potter. It can be applied to a story by a nonprofit. And it can, it's really an outline. So once you have that outline, you can tailor it to different platforms or different mediums depending on your needs and the capacity available to your team. So if you go to hatchforgood.org and click on the content section, there is an exercise that will help you structure your own story based on this story map. Since it takes about 30 minutes to finish that entire exercise, we won't be doing that today, but please feel free to go to the content section and do that exercise in your own time, and you can email us with your answers and we can provide feedback later. And now I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk about the engagement section.
Great. So we just heard from Kamaya about how to build a story, but now I want to talk about what you can do once you have the story. How can you take your story to your target audiences, and how do you get them to really engage in your cause? So that's really where technology comes into play, and we'll be talking a little bit about how you can make the most of technology. So the one thing amazing about technology is that it has made all of us storytellers. We all tell stories about our lives online, and we all have access to the same technology to tell these stories. So, just as we have, embraced this technology in our own personal lives, it's really important that we embrace it for our organizations as well. But while it's never been easier to reach your audiences, it's also never been harder to truly reach them. This is the too much information age. But there are a few guidelines that make this content creation process simpler and can really help you focus on creating quality content. One is the 40-60 content rule, which says that basically you should spend 40% of
Alex, are you still there? Let's see. Might have gotten disconnected, so if y'all just bear with us for just a second here. It looks like, can you all still see Alex's screen or hear him?
We can still see his screen, but we cannot hear him.
Okay, let's see if we can fix that.
Hi, this is Alex and Kamaya again. Can you all hear us?
Oh, good. Yeah, we lost you there for a minute.
All right, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the 40-60 content rule, which is, I think, when the phone cut out. I apologize about
yes. that. That's all
okay.
right. I'm glad we got you back. All right.
Okay, so the 40-60 content rule says that you should spend 40% of your time creating content and 60% of your time promoting and repurposing that content. So, you can also think of it as, you can create as much content as you'd like, but if nobody is seeing that content, then there really is no point in creating more of it. So it's really important that you view it as a 40-60 approach. Next is breaking it down. So think about, a report that you may have created. That report is full of a bunch of rich content and stories. And the World Bank reported that almost a third of their reports were never downloaded. So if you find yourself in a similar problem, it's really helpful to start by breaking down that content into bite-sized pieces. So what are all the different pieces that went into that report? There's probably some photos and some diagrams. There's some quotes and stats, and there's also individual stories and interviews. So at that point, it's helpful to kind of think creatively about how those pieces can be taken out of the report and be made useful on their own. Next is a story bank it. So even if that's just creating an Excel spreadsheet or putting some folders together in Dropbox or Google Drive, we really encourage you to start putting together your content inventory. So that could be things like photos from the field or quotes from people that you're working with, videos of your work being done, etc. So it's also important to remember that your content or your strategy probably won't change very often. It's the foundation and the core of your storytelling, but it's really important that you think about what your individual stories could look like and how they fit into that larger narrative. So look at your existing content and figure out how else that it could be used. So for example, those report photos that I talked about earlier, they could potentially be used on Pinterest boards or on Instagram. Stats could be used for Twitter or even in Facebook images. Videos could be uploaded to YouTube, or so then they could be embedded on your website or even your blog. And those videos can also be uploaded to Facebook separately to kind of boost their visibility within that platform. And those videos could also be broken down into smaller pieces for Vine or Instagram video. So gathering all of your stories together can really help you to start thinking about the types of content that you already have and how you can repurpose it. And you might find that you have more useful stories than you originally thought. Engaging your community. I'm just going to go through a few best practices here. The first is to know your audience. Do some audience research. Find out where they are. Are they on Facebook? Are they on Twitter? Are they reading blogs? Kind of, who are they and how can you best reach them? Select your format. Are they more interested in receiving content via photo or video or maybe blog posts? Next, develop your tone and your voice. So who is your organization? How would they say something? How would they talk about the topic that you work on? All of those sorts of things to make sure that your tone and your voice is consistent across all of your different platforms. Also, identify your influencers. Who can you work with to kind of act as a channel to get to your key audience? Grow your community. Who can you engage with? Who can you talk with? Who can you partner with? And to help share your content, or maybe cross-post others' content that is in your same space. Next, be prepared. Putting content online, you are obviously stepping into a more public square. So just being mindful of that and being prepared with how you might respond to comments and those sorts of things. Shareable. Obviously, if you're putting out content, you want people to engage with it. You want it to be exciting, and you ultimately want people to share it so that your message can be spread further. Repurpose. As I kind of mentioned before, how can you get creative in repurposing your content? And last, have fun. This is social media, and this is a more online presence, and so you're allowed to kind of have a personality. You're allowed to engage with people and have a little bit more flexibility in doing that. So when using stories on social media, there's a few different overarching things to keep in mind. The first, be visual. We know that content that is photos or video have a much higher engagement rate. And they also have, they're much more likely to be shown on platforms like Facebook and even Instagram. The more engaging that content is, the more likely that it's going to show up higher in that feed. Next, a call to action. So a call to action is something that every piece of content that you create should include. And that basically is just telling your audience what exactly they can do for you. And also, it's important to say what will happen if they don't act. So that can really help, create some urgency and to get people to, understand why it's important that they take action now, whether that's visiting your website, whether that's donating, whether that's volunteering, et cetera. But just making it very clear what they can do and what could potentially happen if they do not. And finally, being concise. These days we're always on our phones or on social media, and it's really important that you have 140 characters on Twitter to grab someone's attention. So it's very important that you're very upfront and you're very clear about what your story is and how it can grab someone's attention. It's also important that you start and end your presentation, your speech, or your blog post with a story. Also, put a human face on stats by tying them to a story. We know that hearing someone ramble off a bunch of stats, it's human nature to kind of just tune things out and not really comprehend it. But when you can tie that to a human experience, your audience is much more able to connect with that and to make it more meaningful for themselves. And be visual. Again, I can't stress this enough, but really being visual and putting people in the picture. This means, don't or try not to just show photos of buildings or of, we know that people respond better to and interact with it and can see themselves better if there's a picture of a person. That really helps to create that human connection and can increase the amount of engagement that you'll see. So next, I wanted to just go through some best practices for some specific platforms. And the first one is Facebook. Again, being visual. I can't stress that enough. While just copy is helpful and obviously can be a good storyteller, it's not going to perform as well as if you pair that copy with a visual or a video. So that's something to definitely consider. Tell a story. You are a little bit more, you're able to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of the amount of content that you're able to put on Facebook. So not only can you say that in the copy, but make sure that you're captivating your audiences by using some of the storytelling best practices that Kamaya mentioned earlier. Concise. As I mentioned earlier, people are scrolling through it. You really want to grab their attention as soon as possible and really draw them in. Include that call to action. Make it clear about what they can do and how it would benefit and what would happen if they do not decide to act. Consider including a URL, making it really clear about where they can go to get more information or how they can get involved is very helpful. Tag other people. If you're partnering with another organization, or say you had a great volunteer or a activity with some volunteers at a specific place, tag that other partner so that not only are you sharing the stuff that you're doing out in the community, but also that other organization is then notified. They can share it, and also their followers are then exposed to that story. Be consistent. Whether that's in the amount of times you're posting on Facebook or if it's the types of content that you're posting. So whatever it is, if you're posting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, your audiences will begin to expect that content, and it's just helpful to maintain that consistency so that your audiences know to be on the lookout for it. On Twitter. Twitter is a place that you can be a little bit more creative. Obviously there is that character limit, So you might have to get creative in the way that you talk about things, but also it's just a little bit more of a not lighthearted or like lends itself to being more creative. So definitely take advantage of that. Ask questions. So that's one of the best ways to engage people on Twitter, is to engage in conversations and let people know that you're open to hearing their feedback and that you want to start a dialogue. That's a great way to get conversations going and to also get some valuable storytelling out of that. Talk to others. Twitter is not a place that you're just standing on top of a mountain and shouting at people. You really want to be, on the ground with them and talking back and forth and really, really engaging. Using hashtags. Hashtags are a great way to categorize your conversation as well as to get into conversations that are already happening on Twitter. So that's a great way to find other supporters and those sorts of things. And also be timely. Twitter moves very, very fast. So, what's new 3 hours ago is old news by the time that you're posting about it on Twitter. So really making sure that you're being proactive about your presence on Twitter and really engaging with others in a timely manner is really important. Retweeting. This is a great way to kind of partner with different organizations or to say that you agree about something that someone else is saying on Twitter, and it also kind of shows that you're listening, that you're going through your news feed, and that what that other person has said is valuable. So that's something important to consider. Also, you do have that 140 character limit, so it's important to shorten everything. And we like to use Bitly for that. It not only does that allow you to shorten your links, but it also provides some data on how often the link was clicked and where, which can be very important to the fourth pillar of storytelling, evaluation. So kind of hopping forward a little bit, we're not going to get totally into that today, but just a little shout out to Bitly there. And don't be afraid to tweet often. As I said, Twitter moves really, really fast. So while you might only want to post once a day on Facebook, that rule does definitely not apply on Twitter. You can post, as many times as you feel that you're still getting engagement on the platform. And it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all model. It kind of just depends on how much content you have, and as well as how engaged your community is. So that could be something that you want to test out and see how much is enough. And the last platform I wanted to go over with you is Instagram. So the first thing that's important is obviously it's a visual platform, so it's important to keep your eyes open. You never know when a story, a visual story could pop up, and so keep your eyes open and see if that's something you're able to capture and to share with your audiences on Instagram. Again, create a story. Maybe this is something where one of your supporters wants to have a Instagram takeover, and they want to post four photos during the day with some captions about their story, kind of when their eyes were opened, what obstacles they encountered, what the action that was taken, and how lives were changed. That's something that you could easily do on Instagram to use that story map and also to engage your audiences on that platform. So there's a bunch of different creative ways that you can adapt the story map for your different platforms. Again, use people and faces. We know that people connect more if they can see a human face. So definitely keep that in mind when looking for content that you want to share on Instagram. Create a collage. So obviously, things do not move as fast on Instagram as they do on Twitter. So a way to kind of showcase multiple photos is to create a collage, or even a few weeks ago, Instagram released that new feature where you can upload, I believe it's up to 10 photos at a time per post. So using those sorts of features to create a story or a collage where people can scroll through and kind of see the work that you're doing. Like Twitter, Instagram is a great place for hashtags for the same reasons. You can tag locations or tag specific events and those sorts of things that people might be interested in seeing what others are talking about in that space. And also, as I mentioned earlier, this is the place that you can really be creative with your video. So thinking about, what types of short video clips you could put on there to really engage your audiences and to bring them either back to your website or following your channel. So with that, are there any specific questions for either Kamaya or myself?
Just remember, some of you might be on mute. If you have questions, just make sure to unmute yourself before you ask them, or you can put them in the chat box.
This is Rachel from Swipe at Hunger. I have a quick question about these best practices are awesome, and thank you for sharing them. And often we'll have our community respond, whether it's like being really active or completely inactive or even like unfollowing us or whatever else in reaction to some of these, which is like bound to happen. Do you have any best practices around getting feedback on which one of the best practices, like whenever people respond negatively or positively, like how to incorporate and evaluate our social media when it comes to storytelling?
So what platform are you using where people are unsubscribing or giving you feedback?
Well, at the moment, I'm imagining on Twitter, for instance, right? Like right now we're tweeting 2 or 3 times a day. So if we were to become more active in retweeting, and I think one of the reasons why we are not is because we're worried people might unfollow us, but maybe that's okay, right? So I'm wondering so like, is there any other lesson when it comes to really building our community or communicating a story that we should be aware of picking up on from our audience?
I think one good thing to do, just based on audience feedback or audience engagement and the way they're behaving or reacting based on your content, is to create reports weekly and see which of your posts have worked, which posts haven't, or which tweets haven't, and when are your audiences either engaging more with your content or engaging less and pulling back. And once you have those trends that you can see over a week or over a couple of months, then you can make strategic decisions about the types of stories that are most resonating with your audiences. That's one way to do it. And another way to do it is also, if you have an email list, you could send out a survey and get feedback on the stories that you're sharing and see what's most appealing to your audiences, and then go from there.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? I'll jump in with one. Just going back to some of those call to actions, can you give some examples of maybe some sort of lower barrier to entry call to actions? Certainly on the bigger scale, you can think about asking for donations or getting involvement and interaction, things like that. But what are maybe some easier examples that students and different groups can think about to sort of start to work on that?
I think easy calls to action are read more, taking people back to the website or the article that you're referring to is a very easy one. Read more, check this out.
Share this.
Share, yeah.
I mean, it
depends on what type of content you have and kind of what your goal for that audience is. So what do you want them to do? I think every time you're putting a story out, the one important question you need to ask yourself is who is your audience and what you want them to do, and then what that piece of content is, and then tailor a call to action based on that, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Actually, sort of, did someone else have another question?
I had a follow-up question.
Mhm.
In your experience, is it helpful to give like 2 thresholds of action, like share this or something, where the choice isn't don't act, but the choice is how much of a commitment do you want to make?
I can definitely see some value in that. In my experience, I found that it's easier and you're going to get more reaction if you just give them one very clear thing to do. And so maybe that's, on this first one, share this piece of content or click on this link and, go back to the website. And then maybe once they're on the website, there might be another call to action. So don't, I would say that it's helpful to give a very clear, step-by-step so that you can follow and kind of keep track of where your audience is going and what's working and what isn't. So anything else you'd like to add, Maya?
No, I think it's good to always keep it very simple and focus on one thing, because the more you ask your audiences to do, the less likely they're going to be to do either of those things. So I think, as Alex mentioned, step-by-step, ask is always the right way to go.
Got it.
Good question. Also, I would mention that there, on the Hatch Brigade website under Explore, there's some really great examples, which Kamaya mentioned earlier. But there's also some case studies of how different social impact organizations have been successful and kind of being creative. So I definitely would recommend you check out the Explore section.
And there's also an article specific to calls to action that you can look at in the Explore section that gets more into detail about the questions you've been asking. Any other questions?
Okay, I jump in with one more. Do you have any sort of major don'ts or common mistakes that people make when it comes to storytelling and thinking about the content?
I think some common mistakes that people tend to make is adding too much data to a story, not focusing on the people and the vision enough. So I guess to break it down, people often forget to focus on the people in their stories. They feel like adding a lot of data or focusing on the problem will almost help in getting people's attention more, but that's not the case. I think backing your story up with data is a good way to go, but you have to always remember that you don't overwhelm people with too much data and make them feel like this is a problem that cannot be solved. So this is one very common mistake that we often see people make when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah, they can often make the problem seem so large that it seems unsolvable, and people definitely then start to, they start to feel defeated, or they're like, well, then what's the point in getting involved? So really, kind of framing your problem with specific solutions that address that are kind of easy to understand and is definitely a way to solve that problem.
And lately there has also been some research that aspirational stories are what people react to more. So negative stories or negative framing almost turns people off because they're so overwhelmed with negativity that it's helpful to have a more positive aspect in your stories, so they're more likely to take action. Also, on a lot of social media platforms like Facebook, the more negative your content is, the less likely it is going to be to show up in people's feeds. So being aspirational is important, and just avoiding too much focus on problems.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any more questions?
One more quick question. Sorry. How in your experience do you incorporate a feedback loop? For instance, if somebody does get involved or does do something, is there a way to loop back with them and either thank them or give them some kind of feedback of what their involvement did?
Yep. I think that's a good question, and it really depends on what their involvement was or the way they supported you. But something simple like if they retweet something that you said or mention you or comment on your Facebook post, it's always nice to acknowledge it and kind of reply to their comment or tweet. It makes people feel appreciated, and they're more likely to keep sharing your stories if they feel like you're listening. It's not a one-way street. And if it's more major contributions, then often if it's just a shout out or a post specific to them or a bunch of followers, that also works. So you can have a day in the week or the month where you just give a shout out to some of your regular contributors or followers or whatever is the type of engagement that you've decided to focus on, or even including that in email is always great. I think thanking is always a good thing. And again, if you go to our Explore section, we have a bunch of case studies and tips that focus on how to thank your supporters and make them feel appreciated. That's a really great question because a lot of people tend to forget that, but it's important in keeping your audiences engaged in your work and your stories.
Good.
Great. Are there any other questions? I did want to put up Kamaya's email address here. I know she had mentioned that if you wanted to fill out those toolkits that she mentioned earlier, or if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free. I'm going to give out your email address, Kamaya.
Yeah,
it's on the screen here. Mine is just aorton@hattaway.com if you don't want to bother Kamaya. But are there any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you both so much for spending your time today and sharing all of your fantastic knowledge with us. I will, like I said, I'll have the webinar recorded and sent out in just a little bit, and I will also include some of the contact information here for Kamaya and for Alex, as well as the Hatch for Good website. So thank you both so much, and thank you all for coming out today.
Thank you. This was great.
It's great to speak to you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.